In late October of 2023, a lone figure, Nathan Reed, a 34-year-old man, stumbled out of the dense woods skirting Sago, West Virginia. He was clearly shaken, recounting to bewildered authorities a morning spent deep within a sealed-off section of the abandoned Sago mine. This wasn't just any old mine. It was a site forever scarred by one of the deadliest mining disasters in recent U.S. history. Nathan's story was incredible. He claimed to have slipped into the mine through a forgotten ventilation shaft just after dawn, equipped only with standard caving gear and a headlamp. For hours later, he re-emerged, disoriented, clutching a weathered miner's note in a sealed bag, and insisting he had recorded something extraordinary inside. Local officials, however, quickly dismissed his claims. Their skepticism seemed justified. The ventilation shaft he described was later found collapsed, with no signs of recent entry. His audio recordings were little more than static, and his photographs proved inconclusive. Yet, for those who heard Nathan's tale, it wasn't the tangible evidence he brought out that lingered. It was the chilling sights and sounds he swore he experienced within the mine's depths. I've explored countless places people deliberately avoid: decaying asylums, desolate ghost towns, and derelict hospitals steeped in grim histories. But the Sago mine felt different. It wasn't just the inherent tragedy, it was the way locals spoke of it. Or, more accurately, the way they didn't. Whispers, that's all I ever managed to extract. Their responses were terse, their eyes always darting away. The occasional mumbled, "Just let them rest," was devoid of urban legends or dramatic embellishments, just pure avoidance. In my experience, when a place evokes such genuine fear, it usually means something very real occurred there. I rolled into Upshur County, West Virginia, on a crisp Tuesday morning in late October. The air was sharp and dry, with the season's first frost clinging to the roadside grass. I parked half a mile from the main, sealed entrance of the Sago mine and began my hike before dawn, sticking to the less-traveled service roads. My gear was standard for an expedition like this: a high-lumen headlamp, backup flashlight, filtered respirator, CO2 monitor, GoPro, and a crucial handheld methane detector. That last item was critical. Even abandoned, a mine can turn deadly without a whisper of warning. The main drift entry had long been collapsed and fenced off, but I'd found blueprints online that hinted at secondary access points. These were often old ventilation shafts, partially obscured by debris or thick vegetation, and I'd devoured enough mining forums to know how to pinpoint them. Just after 6 a.m., I located one off a game trail, hidden behind a dense thicket of leafless rhododendron. It was narrow, barely 2.5 feet wide, but I managed to squeeze through. Once inside, the silence was overwhelming. It wasn't just quiet, it was thick, heavy, as if the mine itself was holding its breath. My journey had only just begun. The passage plunged steeply for the initial 30 feet before gradually leveling out into a drift tunnel, roughly 6 feet high and perhaps 5 feet wide. The floor still bore the skeletal remains of old steel tracks, rusted and warped by time. A thick, gritty, metallic dust coated every surface, unlike anything I'd encountered in an attic. My respirator remained firmly in place. My methane detector hummed softly every few minutes, a gentle warning, not an alarm, indicating trace levels to be expected. At precisely 6:42 a.m., I passed an old ventilation bulkhead, half collapsed and hanging like a torn curtain. Beyond this point, the silence intensified, becoming almost oppressive. Even my own footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the void, unwilling to echo. The potent beam from my headlamp sliced through the absolute dark, illuminating relics of the past: abandoned tools, a shattered hard hat, twisted cable reels. Every object looked like it had been left in a sudden, frantic rush. Nothing was neatly stored. It felt profoundly wrong, as if the mine had simply frozen mid-breath and never exhaled. By 7:15, my GPS indicated I'd ventured approximately 1,200 feet deep. That's when I encountered my first crosscut, an intersecting tunnel veering off into even deeper sections of the mine. I resisted the urge to explore it. Not yet. Something about it felt off, the air there seeming thicker, heavier. At 7:38 a.m., I reached a larger junction chamber, perhaps 12 feet high, with 3 distinct exits. One of these exits had completely collapsed. Another bore clear signs of the explosion: blackened walls, melted light fixtures, undeniable evidence of intense heat damage. The third tunnel, however, sloped downward. This was my chosen path. The deeper I descended, the more pronounced the temperature shift became. It wasn't colder, but surprisingly warmer, damp, with a distinct chemical tang permeating the air. My CO2 monitor flickered. Not dangerously, but enough to register a clear red flag. I double-checked my air filter. It was still functioning correctly. Then, from somewhere behind me, perhaps 30 yards back, a single clatter echoed, like a rock giving way. I spun around, my light sweeping the darkness. Nothing. The tunnel was empty, but something had definitely moved. At 8:02 a.m., I stumbled upon it. The helmet. It lay propped against the tunnel wall, nestled near a broken wooden support beam. Most of it was caked in dust, but when I wiped it clean with my glove, I saw the faded painted stencil, D. Bennett. A quick check of the list of miners underground that tragic day confirmed it. David Bennett, age 27, one of the 12 who never made it out. I stood there, staring at that helmet for a long time, the weight of its owner's fate pressing down on me. Then, I opened my pack and retrieved a Ziploc bag. My intention wasn't to take it, merely to photograph it, to document its grim resting place. But as I flipped it over, something slipped out from inside. A piece of paper, folded, stiff with age. It was a note, barely legible. Most of the ink bled into the fibers. Yet, I could discern the agonizing words. Tell her I didn't stop trying. Love you. It was then that the very air in the tunnel seemed to shift, not physically, but emotionally, as if the mine itself had suddenly become aware of my presence. My headlamp momentarily dimmed. My ears popped. And then, the sound. Faint, distant male voices, like muffled conversations behind a thick wall. I slowly rotated, trying to pinpoint the direction. Could it be an echo? My own breathing bouncing off the rock? No, I knew what I heard. And then I saw them. Markings carved into the rock wall at shoulder height, stretching for 20 feet. They weren't deep, more like scratches than true carvings, forming unsettling patterns, circles, intersecting lines, tally marks. Some were drawn in what looked like rust, others were blackened soot. I photographed everything, zooming in. My gloved hand brushed one of the symbols, and when I pulled it back, it was stained. The voices grew louder. Hey, get out. Still here. I held my breath. The tunnel ahead narrowed, leading to a rusted door frame that opened into an old man-ripped garage, a place where miners once waited for rail transport deeper into the network. The door was ajar. Inside, the room was covered in even more markings, a chaotic jumble of scratched words and shapes across the walls and ceiling. In a corner, an old oxygen tank lay on its side, ruptured. Then, my headlamp flickered again and died. Total darkness. I froze. No sound, no light, just the wet drip of condensation and the suffocating grip of panic squeezing my chest. I fumbled for my backup flashlight. It sputtered once, then stubbornly came to life. The room, however, had changed. The markings were still there, but now they glistened, fresh, wet, as if they'd just been drawn. And in the center of the floor, a deep boot print filled with black water, still dripping. Then the voices returned, clearer this time. Help us. 12 of us. He lied. Not alone. They didn't come from a single direction. They came from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the very air itself. My heart pounded as I backed away. The beam of my flashlight swept across the far wall and landed on something impossible, a photo pinned to the rock with a rusted nail. It showed a group of men in mining gear, dirty, smiling, oblivious. And one of them, dead center, was me, wearing my current jacket, holding the same flashlight. But I had never been here before. I staggered back, lungs tightening. The air buzzed with a low-frequency hum. My methane detector screeched. Dangerous levels. I didn't hesitate. I bolted back through the man-rip room, down the tunnel, past the helmet, past the unsettling symbols. The walls groaned behind me, a deep, unsettling tremor, as if the very mine itself were collapsing or shifting. I didn't stop, fueled by pure adrenaline, until I burst into the junction chamber. From there, I barely navigated my way back to the entrance shaft, scraping my shoulders and arms raw on the narrow rock as I scrambled desperately out into the blessedly cool daylight. The time was 9:41 a.m. The silence outside felt just as heavy, just as oppressive, as the suffocating dark within. I collapsed by my car, spending over an hour reviewing my camera footage. To my dismay, some of it had corrupted. The crucial section with the impossible photo was gone, replaced by maddening static. The audio did contain voices, but they were distorted, fragmented, enough to raise profound questions, but not enough to offer any definitive confirmation. I still keep the note from the helmet. It rests in a sealed container in my apartment. I've shown it to a few experts. Their verdict? The ink degradation is entirely consistent with paper left underground for nearly 2 decades. But here's the unsettling part. When I returned 2 weeks later with a proper crew, the access shaft was gone. Collapsed. No signs of recent entry. No helmet. No carvings. Nothing. Sometimes I wonder if it was all a delusion. Perhaps the gases warped my perception, or the crushing pressure and utter darkness twisted what I saw. But I still have the photo. The one of the miners. My face isn't in it anymore. But my jacket, chillingly, still is.